الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. We usually take this time before Salat al-Jummah to answer questions that have been submitted online. If you're interested in having your question answered, there are three ways of doing that. If you go to the entrance, there's a picture of me, which I don't particularly like too much, but there's a QR code on it. You can scan the code and you can submit your question, or you can download our app. It's the Al-Hijrah app. It is available both on the App Store and on the Play Store, or you can go to our website, hijrah.org, that's hijrah.org, to submit your question. So last week, I wanted to finish talking a little bit about the question that I had received. It's basically about like sisters who are coming in without hijab, and I want to expand this a little bit also to people who might not be dressed or what we feel to be appropriate. It really depends on the person, and it depends on how they're dressed, right? So if they're coming and like we had said last time, they're disrespecting the space, it's very different than being dressed in a way that we wouldn't be considered Islamic. There are two levels and there are two understandings to that. Because like we said, like if a non-Muslim woman comes in here, we wouldn't expect her to dress like a Muslim because she is not Muslim. In the same way, in the same vein, we would apply that to Muslim men. But at the same time, we don't know where people are coming from. This does not take away from the obligation of hijab. This does not take away from the obligation of dressing appropriately. But it's important to understand, and the best way to advise someone is to build a relationship with them. And I don't mean becoming their best friend, right? That's not what my intention is. My intention is that in order for me to advise someone, me going up to them and saying, oh, assalamu alaikum, or hello, what is your name? How are you doing? Is this the first time you're here? You know, is there something I can help you with? I've established that relationship, and at that point, and be like, hey, listen, you know, there might be people here who won't be as comfortable with you. You know, it might be a better idea to do X, Y, Z, instead of just jumping in and be like, oh, you can't look like this, or you can't dress like that, or you can't speak like this. It's not going to go well, and it'll just end up being adversarial. The other way to do it is go talk to the administration, right? That's always an easy thing to do because the administration is responsible for the institution. And anybody in the administration is responsible for the institution. And once a musalli, once a congregant goes to the admin and they tell them like, hey, listen, I saw this, that's enough, right? You don't need 50 people going and talking to one person. It's usually not going to bring a good result. And I'll just give a very clear example of that. If here you had a Bedouin man come into the masjid, Masjid Nabawi, right? So the second holiest place that we have in Islam. He goes into a corner and he urinates. All of the companions, they're gonna get up and they wanted to attack this person and stop him. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ala rislikum." He's like, calm down. It's not a big deal. I'll take care of it. So after he was done, the Prophet ﷺ said, bring a bucket of water. He poured the water over the urine and he sat down with the Bedouin men. And he gave him the rulings and he told him like, listen, this is the masjid, you know, you can't do this in here. And the man, subhanAllah, he said something amazing. He looked around at the other companions and he said, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and me only. Why did he say that? Because he was angry at everyone else, and this shows the perception on how we should deal with people, right? It wouldn't have come across well had you had so many people jumping on this person. Having one person who can approach with hudu, with control, and all of these things. Now, if you have somebody who keeps pushing back, at that point you have security, and the person will be escorted off the premises. But if somebody is cooperating, there's no reason to enter into an argument. There's no reason to make people more agitated, to make people more angry. Like, we're already a huge community, right? We're already extremely busy. I mean, how many people had parking issues even before they came in, right? So some people are already coming in like angry, right? Because they couldn't find parking, or because they had to walk in the rain, or they're sitting in a place they didn't want to sit in. So we have to understand each of us has our own individual frustrations, and those frustrations sometimes can come out in an inappropriate way. And that's where we have to show taqwa, that's where we have to show sabr when we deal with one another. The next question, are the Ash'ira and Maturidiyya part of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah? So over here, this question, it's not the first time that this one has come up, but what number one is an Ash'ari and what number one is a Maturidi? And historically, what do these schools represent? So the talk about this is not as popular, for example, when we talk about madhahib. When we talk about madhahib, we're usually talking about madhahib fiqhiyah. And what are the famous madhahib, right? So we have from the oldest of them, the Hanafis, right, from Imam Abu Hanifa, then Imam Malik, and Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. These are the fiqhi schools. What is the purpose of a fiqhi school? The purpose of a fiqhi school is to take all of the rulings that are found in the Quran, to take all the rulings that are found in the Sunnah, and to make them, bring them in a digestible manner so that we know what we are supposed to do. So the Sharia, no doubt, is the Quran and the Sunnah. How we understand the Quran and the Sunnah is going to be according to those different methodologies, right? Whether it be on the methodology of Imam Abu Hanifa, or Imam Malik, or Imam Shafi, or Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal. And then you have scholars who came and they codified that. طيب, these schools, these are also schools. These are also madahib. So when you talk about madahib, those are madahib in fiqh, and these are madahib in aqidah, in belief. What issues do they talk about? So when you have the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyah, which are two famous schools, you also have another famous school. You have the Hanabila. You also have schools other than them. But these three schools are the ones all scholars have considered Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Why is that? Because these are the schools that talk about, number one, how do I deal with the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it something that we can comprehend? No. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than anything we can imagine. And these are ways to deal with some of those problematic and some of those difficult issues. And what are the issues that these schools talk about? They talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's essence. They talk about His characteristics. They talk about qadr and free will and how to manage these two issues. Right? They talk about issues of the ghaib. How do we understand ghaibi issues and unseen issues? That is the difference in these polemic schools. Who are these aqadi schools for? These aqadi schools are for academics. Just like the madhabi schools, we might have taken them culturally, but even if I ask someone, okay, well, and he says, well, I'm Maliki, I'll be like, okay, what is the first book that most Malikis study? How many people will be able to answer? Or it's like, I'm Hanafi, okay, what is the first book that most Hanafis study? Most people won't be able to answer. Why? Because those are, like when a person gets into that level of fiqh, it is an academic discussion, and it is the same thing here in aqidah. There are some issues that are meant to be academic discussions, not discussions that everybody gets involved in. As Muslims, what are we supposed to believe? As Muslims, what are we supposed to believe? We're supposed to believe in the 5 pillars of Islam and the 6 pillars of Iman. That's it. It's as simple as that. Anybody who believes in these things and they believe in those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made muharram, that they are haram, then that's it. That's what makes a Muslim. As for how, why, the mechanism, all of these different things, these are discussions for scholars. These are discussions for ulama. These are not discussions that most Muslims have. And even if they have them, the discussion many times doesn't make sense because he doesn't know and he doesn't know, and you can't have two people who don't know talking about an issue, and it doesn't benefit. So even if a person says, okay, well, I'm from the Ashari school, and another person says, I'm from the Maturidi school, and another person says, I'm from the Hanbali school, does it matter? Because even if I ask them, I said, okay, what books are you supposed to study in each of those schools? If I ask you to open Ibana, or if I ask you to open or if I ask you to open Imam Nasafi's book, or if I ask you to open up any of the classical books or the classical works that were done in Aqidah, even then you'll find most of it is like, وَإِن قِيلْ قَالْ. It's debates. Right, they're debates between the different schools on how to deal with different issues and how to deal with different problems. So saying that, historically, yes, the ulama have said that Ahl Sunnah, or the people of the Sunnah, are these 3 polemic schools, or these 3 aqadi schools. There's Asha'ira, the Maturidiyah, and the Hanabila, sometimes called the Athari school. But these 3 schools, what do they deal with? They deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's essence, they deal with His characteristics, they deal with how to define qadr and how to deal with it. When you talk about the issue of free will and you talk about the issue of divine pre-decree, how do you balance these things? This is something, it's not an easy conversation, right? It's something that is very difficult, and this is why you have scholars and you have academics who talk about these things and discuss those things. Is ta'wil authorized in the Quran versus our hadith that describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so we can attribute things to Him that benefit His majesty? So again, this is a discussion that deals with Allah's essence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, let me just share one example, and then from there we can decide on whether you can do analogy with the verses of the Quran or not. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تجعل يدك مغلولة إلى عنقك ولا تبسطها كل البسط فتأخذ ملوما محظورا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't place your hand on your neck and don't open it completely, otherwise you will be the one that sits destitute and blameworthy. Is it haram for me to hold my hand like this? Is that what the verse means? Is it haram for me to hold my hand like this? No, that's not what that means. What does it mean? Ahsant. Right? It has to do with spending. So when I put my hand like this, what does that mean? I'm being what? I'm being stingy. And when I'm doing like this, what am I doing? I'm wasting. I'm being a spendthrift. am I supposed to take this verse as in a superficial way? No. That's all I have to say about this. If I can apply analogy here, the scholars who allow for ta'wil and analogy, if they can allow it here, they will allow it in other places. It's as simple as that. And there are some scholars who will say, no, you're not supposed to do any ta'wil, you're not supposed to do any analogy at all. وَلَهُمْ حَقٌّ. But do the people who claim that ta'wil and analogy is permissible, do they have a wedge? Do they have an argument to stand on? Yes, they do. Whether I agree or not. And those who say that, okay, this only works with the creation, right? You can do it when it comes to dealing with people, but you can't do it when you're dealing with Allah. You say, okay, what do you do? We say, we don't do anything. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions something, we take it. We don't ask about it. وَلَهُمْ حَقٌّ. And they have a right to do that. Why? Because when it comes to dealing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, are there special rules? Yes or no? When I deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are special rules. What are those rules? This is where you find these discussions. Is it important for every Muslim to know them? No, I don't think so at all. I have to believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alone. I have to believe He's all powerful. I have to believe He is the one that is worthy of worship azza wa jal. As for how it happens and the mechanics and all of these things, these are not discussions that Muslims should get involved in. It only brings differing. I can guarantee that. Such discussions only bring a tafriqah, and they don't bring unity. Why? Because these are scholarly, academic discussions. These are not discussions that the lay Muslim should have, and Allah knows best. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin. Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.